Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Phil Kurut, and before we get started, today's show is brought to you by the COVID vaccine. As our president would say, double vaxxed, double boosted, two positive COVID tests. The COVID vaccine. We almost nailed it. So, this past Wednesday, Joe Biden held his first meeting with the Interagency Task Force on Reproductive Healthcare Access, or, as seems more appropriate, the Pro-Abortion Task Force. So the main players here were President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Attorney General Merrick Garland, and Secretary of Health and Human Services Xavier Becerra. Now, you might remember Xavier Becerra. If you don't remember, you haven't seen it yet, you got to go check it out. But he had an issue during a congressional hearing about saying that mothers can get pregnant. He wanted to say pregnant persons, I believe. So he didn't want to use the word mother, as that might be offensive for whatever reason to whoever. Anyway, let's get started with the video, and I will talk and go from there.
Thank you, Vice President Harris, for leading today's meeting. And thanks to you, all of you, especially Health and Human Services Secretary Becerra and Director of the Gender Policy Council, Jen Klein, for co-chairing this task force. And Attorney General Garland, Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas.
Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas is also the guy that currently isn't doing much to secure the border.
And Veterans Affairs Secretary McDonough for your work on this task force. To protect access to a woman's right to choose reproductive health care in the wake of the Supreme Court's extreme decision of wiping out a 50-year constitutional precedent of Roe v. Wade.
Now, he uses extreme decision because to say something's an extreme decision helps keep people divided. And he'll also make other comments that would appear to be divisive from the most unifying president ever elected in our history.
You know, I created this task force by executive order last month and to ensure that every part of the federal government does its part at this critical moment where women's health and lives are on the line amidst chaos and uncertainty unleashed by this decision. Emergency medical care being denied to women experiencing miscarriages. Doctors uncertain about what they can do to provide for the patients. Pharmacists unsure whether they can fill prescriptions that they've always filled before.
So all of this saying that women are being denied access if they have a miscarriage, and doctors being confused and pharmacists being confused, this all aids in causing confusion. Let there be no doubt about that.
A tragic case of rape survivors, including a 10-year-old girl forced to travel to another state for care, wiping out the right to choose on whether you have incest, incest, or having a rape, this is just extreme.
It's always funny when Joe Biden forgets what he's talking about or what he's saying, even though it's written in front of him. All he literally has to do is read it and then say it out loud. And then he'll just drop even trying. Whether it comes to rape or, the thing.
Even the life of the mother is in question in some cases, in some states.
I don't think that's right.
Congress and their extreme MAGA ideology are determined.
And by I don't think that's right, I don't think that's correct. I don't think there's doctors out there when a mother's life is at risk saying, I'm so confused, I don't know if I can help you.
Go even further, talking about nationwide bans that would outlaw abortion in every state under every circumstance, going after the broader right to privacy as well. Court practically dared women in this country.
So him saying how people are going after the right to privacy and to ban abortion nationwide, I think there are some people that are going for that, but how they're playing it right now, that's not what the Supreme Court decision indicated or promoted.
To go to the ballot box and restore the right to choose that the court had just ripped away after 50 years. Healthcare.
And he's actually right. I don't know that the Supreme Court dared women to go to the ballot box, but the Supreme Court said we are giving that choice and that regulation back to the states because the Supreme Court realized that this is not power we ever should have had to begin with.
It says women can't choose. Can't get an abortion even in the case of incest, even in the case of rape. But it goes beyond that. There are a lot of women who take prescriptions prescribed by their doctors and have been taking for some time for other conditions, for arthritis, for epilepsy, for Crohn's diseases. And in many cases, these prescriptions are not being filled.
So he's just pulling stuff out now, just trying to. It's like when the Supreme Court decision was leaked, and a lot of people on the left, I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of people on the left were pushing that the Supreme Court is looking to ban abortion. That's not what the Supreme Court was doing. And even when that decision was finally passed, it still wasn't a decision to ban abortion. That's not what that decision was about at all. And then he talks about how women can't get this medication or that medication. It's just more it's more of an attempt to cause confusion, to cause chaos, to divide people. That's what all this is.
Under federal laws, no woman, whether pregnant or not, no matter where she lives, should be turned away or denied necessary treatment during a medical crisis.
This necessary treatment during a medical crisis, I think pretty much everybody that talks, and I did condense this video. This was like a 30 or 40-minute presentation, so I condensed it for some key points. But this medical crisis or emergency, I think the other people that you're going to see talk all mention this, and I do have some comments to make at the end here about that phrasing.
The Justice Department stepped in to make sure that this extreme state law criminalizing abortion does not put women's health and lives at risk in these situations. You know, this executive order also helps women travel out of state for medical care.
Okay, so he's talking about an executive order that's going to be supported by Medicare. For those not familiar, the Hyde Amendment, let me look at here, is a legislative provision barring the use of federal funds to pay for abortion, except to save the life of the woman or if pregnancy arises from incest or rape. So they haven't, the thing that the administration hasn't done is to say that they would be okay with abortion if it threatens the mother's life or if it's caused by incest or rape. They haven't really said that that's all they're willing to do. They mention that in comments and they refer back to the Hyde Amendment, but almost every other action they take and every other thing they say, really what they want is just, as it's been slated and called, is abortion on demand. So you don't have to have a reason other than you don't want to have a baby now.
Secretary Becerra is going to work with states through the Medicaid to allow them to provide reproductive health care for women who live in states where abortions are being banned in that state.
So if the federal government is working with Medicaid to provide that to people, that's taxpayer money.
Executive order makes sure healthcare providers comply with federal laws so women don't face delays or denials of medically necessary care. And this executive order advances research and data collection to evaluate the impact of this reproductive health crisis is having on maternal health and other health conditions and outcomes.
How about the research that needs to be done on how masking kids and closing down schools affected kids' mental health? Because it's definitely out there.
This executive order builds
not necessarily the research, but the effects of that.
On the first one I signed last month that created this task force in the first place. And that also will help safeguard access to healthcare, including the right to choose and contraception, promote safety and security of clinics, patients, and providers, protects patients' privacy and access to accurate information.
Protect patients' privacy and access to information. Okay, so not to belabor the issue, but when we were going through COVID, you were expected to post a freaking picture of your COVID passport, your vaccine passport. Doesn't seem real private to me. And you had to tell everybody from a waiter at Burger King to a person at the airport whether you've been vaccinated.
Thank you. Do I sign this order now?
Okay, once again, Joe Biden getting permission from his staffers on whether he should sign something. Had there been reporters at this thing where they weren't allowed to ask questions anyway, or I don't know if there were reporters there or not. They didn't ask any questions. But had there been press there and they would have been able to ask questions, he would have had a list of who he's allowed to call on and who he's not.
I'm going to sign this executive order right now, okay? You're on mute. I can't hear you.
Okay, in all honesty, I just put that part in there because I thought it was funny. He said, "You're on mute. I can't hear you." nobody said anything prior to that. So he literally couldn't hear them because nobody said anything. Anyway, sorry, that was a side thing.
We trust the women of America
Kamala Harris is talking. Could have stayed on mute.
to make those decisions if she chooses in consultation with her faith leader, with her physician.
With her faith leader. So our administration is actually talking about religion as though it matters in our country, which it kind of does, but they want to black it out anytime it doesn't suit their needs. This happens to suit their needs because they're trying to pull more people into this idea.
With her loved one. But we understand fully the government should not be making that decision for her.
Kind of like the government shouldn't be making a decision whether you get to keep your job if you don't want to get something put in your body that hasn't been super effective.
And it is with that spirit that the president has convened this task force of these leaders to ensure that we have a whole-of-government approach to our work, understanding that every day in America, especially with these extremist so-called leaders in states passing these laws, some of which will criminalize healthcare providers and punish women.
We would hate to criminalize healthcare providers and punish women, even though that's not what we're doing, and to say that these are extreme leaders in other states. What about the extreme leaders that watch their cities be burnt to the ground and then made excuses and turned a blind eye to that? It seems more extreme to put your entire city at jeopardy and let a group of thugs take over your police department than it does to say, hey, states, why don't you make a choice on this abortion thing?
That we do everything in our power, in our ability, based on our role to ensure that we protect the women of America.
She's trying so hard not to repeat the same word 5 times in the same sentence.
Around some of the most intimate decisions that any human being can make. So it is with that spirit and purpose that we convene and we meet. We will be engaged in an in-depth discussion about the role of the various agencies and the cabinet members and their roles of leadership around this important issue. Government should not be mandating those decisions for the women of America.
Again, government shouldn't be mandating medical decisions. It's very ironic.
People are scared. When they look at these laws that are being passed and they understand what it means for themselves or someone they love, they are concerned, they are confused. When you look at a map,
Oh, the map thing's
I have
great.
here somewhere,
You don't.
in terms of what this means in our country, and I don't have the map at the moment.
No, she doesn't.
My staff will tell me where that map is at the moment.
The nervous laugh of I didn't come prepared.
We will be discussing what we need to do to address the profound misinformation and disinformation.
Misinformation and disinformation. Really? I believe that's what they started doing as soon as the Supreme Court decision was leaked. Abortion's going to be banned everywhere. They're going to outlaw gay marriage. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They might not want to be talking about misinformation.
That is out there and can only thrive in an environment where there is confusion about what is the right approach and what is the law.
The right approach and what is the law? That is something they get confused often. So in their minds, the right approach was to let people burn down cities. That's against the law. Just saying.
I promise that I have a map. I'm going to now
She
show you
found the
that
map.
map.
So I like I said, I condensed this a little bit. One of her staffers actually handed her that map, and then she's going to say something very interesting. And pay attention to Merrick Garland's face. Okay, she's going to say something about you don't really need to know this part of it. Okay.
And you don't need to necessarily be able to read the words on the map, but you can see the color coding.
You see his face drop? You don't need to see what it says here, but just look at how we've colored in the map. Merrick Garland's face dropped a little bit because whether it seems like it or not with a lot of the things he does, evidence and proof and some facts behind what you're saying do matter. So the fact that she just scrambled that all away, I think even Merrick Garland kind of got like, you said that out loud. But good job. You did. I don't think you repeated any words, but you did say it out loud.
To understand, this map represents our current assessment of the various laws that exist right now
I think it was a color by numbers. I'm just saying.
in these United States of America. Different approaches in different states to this issue.
Which is what the Supreme Court said it should be, instead of the federal government telling every state what they have to do. The federal government doesn't have a whole lot of problem telling that different states can sell marijuana and other states decide they're not going to. Federal government doesn't have a problem with states deciding that for themselves. Anyway.
Which some might argue has been by design to intentionally confuse people.
I would agree with that. A lot of what our administration is saying and the left says is done intentionally to confuse people.
About their rights, but what in fact it has done without any question is made clear that
She's putting that on her fridge when she gets home, isn't she? Sorry.
President's leadership, the leadership of the president's cabinet, and all of us at this table is critically necessary at this moment.
Since the Supreme Court's
Here's Becerra. He does not know the definition of mother. I'm glad he's on this task force involving women.
misguided decision put the lives of millions of Americans, our
It did not put the lives of millions of Americans at risk.
fellow Americans, at risk and stripped away freedom and autonomy. We've all had to take action. We've gone on to protect patient privacy interests and to protect patients and providers from discrimination by issuing guidance. We recently did that by issuing guidance to roughly 60,000 U.S. retail pharmacies. We did it by notifying all health insurance carriers, reminding them of their obligation to respect the civil rights of all Americans and to not discriminate in the dispensation of services and care to all patients. We released our draft rule on non-discrimination in healthcare last week. And just because your state has decided to restrict your access to healthcare does not mean your privacy can be tossed to the wind or you can be discriminated against.
Or just because you decide you don't want to get a vaccine doesn't mean your privacy or civil rights gets trampled on.
We have issued guidance on the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, EMTALA, which I know that the Attorney General will speak more to affirm that that law protects emergency department providers when offering legally mandated life or health-saving abortion services in emergency situations.
So, like I said, I'm going to talk about that life or health-saving abortion services. I've got a theory about that.
The law requires providers to offer stabilizing treatment to prevent a patient's condition from placing that patient in jeopardy, serious jeopardy, or at risk of serious impairment or dysfunction of bodily functions or any bodily organ. Providers may not delay care until a woman is in a life-threatening condition. We still have much to do, and we're going to continue forward, including, for example, in making sure medication abortion is available to women throughout this country. And we won't stop. We were given direction early on by the President and the Vice President. We will continue to move forward.
And we know that the harms caused by these laws have been and will continue to be especially severe for people of color and for those of limited means. States may...
So this law that the Supreme Court passed saying it's back to the states is somehow going to negatively affect people of color or people that are maybe impoverished, okay? Ultimately, what it sounds like they're saying to me, our administration, is people of color and poor people need to have access to more abortions. Does that sound odd? Sounds a little weird when you say it out loud.
not ban the abortion medication mifepristone on disagreement with the FDA's expert judgment about its efficacy and safety.
Efficacy and safety from the FDA. I hate to ring the bell again, but COVID vaccine. Efficacy.
As we explained in our complaint, Idaho's near total ban on abortion directly conflicts with the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, or EMTALA. That federal law requires hospitals receiving Medicare funds to provide necessary stabilizing treatment to people suffering from an emergency medical condition.
Emergency medical condition.
As I said when we announced this suit, it does not matter what state a hospital subject to EMTALA is located in. If a patient comes into an emergency room with a medical emergency jeopardizing the patient's life or health, the hospital must provide the treatment necessary to stabilize that condition. And this includes abortion when that is the necessary treatment.
Okay, so here's the main things that I took from that. For one, I don't think this is necessarily a healthcare access task force. This is very much a pro-abortion task force. Now, I feel like the only way this country gets this abortion thing solved is going to have to be through compromise. Now, whether you agree with that or not, I don't know, but I can see the argument where you think somebody should be able to, a woman should be able to get an abortion if her life is at risk, if there was rape or incest involved. I tend to understand that. I also understand the argument that even though rape or incest was involved, it's unfair to the unborn child to be killed because of that situation, because they have nothing in it, they're innocent. I get both those arguments. I think both extremes of those arguments, where saying a woman shouldn't be getting an abortion ever unless her life is at risk, or women should be able to have an abortion till the time they go to give birth, none of those I don't think are going to be optimal solutions for our country. I just don't see either of those happening. I think there's going to have to be a compromise, which unfortunately a lot of people aren't up for. And I think that's going to be an issue. So as far as what this task force said, the medical emergency jeopardizing the patient's life or health. Life or health, my prediction is the definition of those words are going to be used very loosely very soon. And why I say that is because this administration in general and the left in general has a very consistent behavior of changing definitions as they see fit. Take, for instance, the word recession. Now that it appears we're in a recession, the administration and members of the left are like, I mean, the definition of recession isn't really the definition of recession. Now the definition of recession is this, which we came up with. And I think that what's probably going to happen is the definitions of life-saving or healthcare emergency is going to change. I don't think the definition is going to be, it's an emergency because the mother might die, or it's an emergency because the woman was raped, or this is a case of incest. I think what it's going to become is it's an emergency because this could be really bad for how she feels about herself. This could cause depression if she has to go through this pregnancy. The thing that is rarely ever brought up when it comes to pregnancy and abortion or the decision of that, and let's, just for the sake of argument, let's take out the cases of incest, rape, or the mom's life being at risk. Let's say that's all okay. There's no problem with that. Everybody's on board with that, just for the sake of argument. The other issue that never comes up is self-control and personal responsibility. We all know, if you're an adult or you have some health education through school, and even if you're younger, if you're a kid, but we all know where babies come from. This isn't a surprise. So if you're not taking personal responsibility, or you're neglecting to have any self-control and you get pregnant, that is not an emergency. And I have a feeling that those things are going to become emergencies. The lack of personal responsibility and the lack of self-control are going to get thrown in with emergencies because, like I said, it might cause depression, or, oh, this is really inconvenient. It might change her life. So now this is an emergency. And not only her life, the left has made some very good arguments, kind of sarcastically, but I actually agree with them, saying that, well, if the mother has to carry the baby to term, does the father have to pay child support and this or that? Yes. That would be great. That would be great to hold the mother and the father accountable, both of them. I 100% agree. That's how it should work. That's how it should be. I have no argument with that. All these arguments to the left throughout, it's like, well, I guess dads need to be responsible, blah, 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 this or that. That's what the right's been saying forever. The right has been saying forever. When you look at kids that have problems, it comes from broken homes. It comes from fathers not being in the home. So yes, we are on board for the fathers being responsible and to be held accountable. So that is this week's show, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Have a good one, and I'll see you soon.